in the sun. This is standard throughout Asia. Are they signaling a temperature shift on the surface of the sun where these coronal hole streams will become visible to our naked eye as the actual luminance of the sun changes in a grand solar minimum? Chinese mythology also encompasses plasma filaments touching from the sun to the Earth's surface. Shepard, Zarkov, and Zarkova's work with canceling hemispheric effects, ushering in a grand solar minimum. And when we get a wave state change, we get a phase state change as well. And it's my firm belief when the solar wind pressure drops below 36%, as in the protector weapons, that 36 is so encoded in Chinese mythology that 36% is it. When it drops below that 36%, the sun is going to unleash an EMP toward the Earth 2019-ish. And while you're watching, please remember to subscribe to Adapt 2030. Now, the main center of all the Chinese myth and legend is the dragon, because that's the most important thing. That is the Birkeland current. Now, they've represented it here in these set of protector sticks, the 36 weapons, if you will. 三十六志士. The cloud dragon to the left. You can see there's high cosmic ray density, low solar activity, wide bulge field. On the right, we can see the Fenglong, the wind dragon, where it's very tight stream, strong solar wind, high solar activity. And knowing that our modern instruments are picking up that solar cycle 25, the next solar cycle, cosmic ray density will be 19% higher than this last cycle. And you ask yourself, well, how high was it last cycle? Actually, it's at 14.5%, not 11. It actually increased. So this is going to usher in a very cloudy planet, absolutely electrically connected. We are going to start to see things so strange in our atmosphere. We've already seen anomalies with what I would consider the legend of the crow, where these filaments come off the sun and they actually touch the surface of the Earth. We saw something just like this on the 21st when we saw those strange filaments coming down. There was a breakthrough direct connection electrically to the surface of our planet. That's when those power outages occurred globally. So you can expect more highly charged particles entering the atmosphere. Now, with these red sprites, was that something that stayed visible instead of milliseconds? It stayed visible for minutes? Is this the kind of change we're talking about in particle density and charge increase? Whatever it is, it all stems back to the legend of the crow. And the crow is represented throughout Asia again and again and again. In Korea, it's the Samjoko. In China, it's the Jinwu. Now, these legends originate from the Yangtze River Delta area, which had several disasters. I think 1920 BC was another inundation in the Yangtze River area, but these bird motifs have been excavated 5000 BC. So we're looking at something 7,000 plus years ago. Now, we know through modern instrumentation that our sun goes through UV intensity variations over the regular 11-year solar cycle. So when it goes into a grand solar minimum on a 400-year cycle, what's it going to look like? Well, Rolf Witsche, talking about the density field falling back to somewhere close to ice age levels that will usher in an absolute change of color on the sun. Instead of having this bright yellow 5000 K plus, it's going to drop down into something around 4000 K, and the entire surface of the sun should dim slightly. When this happens, or the ancient legends talking about these coronal holes being visible to the naked eye or with a simple telescope, because of the colors change on the surface of the sun because of the decreased Kelvin output. Now, when we look at the sun crow in the Chinese mythology, they actually talk about two plasma currents going from the sun touching the Earth. And then because the crows would descend, Shihe did not like that and then covered their eyes to prevent them from doing so. Now, is this talking about covering, is that going darker, as in a representation of the sun becoming a different color downward into a darker spectrum? And I'll bring you back to Sapphire in the center. Left is 2,800-year-old stone carvings, representations of the crow and the sun, center sapphire. To the right is what my best representation I could find of what the crows eating the ground sun or the spring grow, intertwined plasma filaments. And that comes right back to that 2170 BC story about the crows in the sun with Ho-E and this massive climate change event that occurred at that time. We're seeing new plasma jets in the sky. Solar winds are diminishing absolutely and should be down to around 36% around 2019. We have petroglyphs showing us sinusoidal waves and different types of electromagnetic waves carved in stone, literally. And all this points to one single thing, a phase shift in our sun. So I'm going to take you back to the Sapphire project once more, and I'm going to intertwine it with Shepard, Zarkov, and Zarkova's work. Now, Shepard, Zarkov, and Zarkova, we're talking about a dynamo on the sun with an interference pattern in the hemispheric rotations. So when we get around solar cycle 25 and 26, they cancel each other out. And when this happens, we go into an incredibly low state of solar activity, grand solar minimum. Now, they've plotted it out both forward and backward in time, and you can see it very much looks like an electrical wave. It can be measured. So what we're heading for is something that is not on this chart anywhere. It is an exceptional low bounced on an exceptional low. Even during the Maunder minimum and the Dalton minimum, you can see the electrical signature was much higher than what we are entering. We're going to go into a low and then bounce off into another low. We're not going to recover for decades. Different representation here of how these fields are going to pull in on themselves, canceling out into absolute zero, pretty much. And the timeline going out for the effects of this, we're going to hit the first low around 2018, spike a tiny bit, but after that point it is new grand solar minimum, more intense than the Maunder minimum. My personal feeling is ushering in something in the late antique little ice age, repeating a 1,600-year cycle. That would be 4 of the lesser cycles combined into one greater cycle. Japanese legend talk about a repeat of 5 for an intense cycle. I really believe we're going back into something around 535 AD. Let's jump into the chamber at the Sapphire project, the Sapphire environment. It shows you these anodes on the top, those glowing nodules. Now what they found also is what the ancient Chinese referred to as the breath of the dragon. When they limited the power supply down to 1,800 watts DC, there was a gigantic power surge of 2 million watts induced. There was this pressure spike. These ions got trapped between those double layers there, and this goes exactly with Chinese mythology about the breath of the dragon. So modern science has just proven that there is a discharge when one of these events happens in a phase shift, stepping down from high solar activity to low solar activity. That is a massive, massive surge of energy. And just for a little fun here and interesting, I saw this chamber thermal analysis. Let's white out here. Center would be the sun, left and right the dragons. Hey, where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, on the temple tops. Which brings me to my final point. The wave change is in our petroglyphs. The wave change is encoded in Chinese mythology. The wave changes are provable now through the Sapphire project in their chamber. Is using the sacred number of 36. Well, if we go into the numerology, even 3 plus 6 is 9, or 3 times 12 is 36, and 36 is 72, 7 plus 2 is 9, and then if you add a half cycle up to 108, which is a sacred number in Buddhism, 1 plus 8 is 9. We can keep going with this number thing, but anyway, 36 sticks. They encoded the solar wind drop pressure to usher in the EMP, or that same event of 4,200 years that's going to repeat itself. They gave us the number of the solar wind pressure when this event will happen, 36%. Now, I was talking with Lee Wheelbarger, and his only thing about this whole grand solar minimum, he doesn't care about the crop losses, that's secondary, whatever. His whole thing is about the EMP that's going to come off the sun when this phase shifts. So putting the ancient Chinese history together, I'm going to peg that at 36% for the first EMP, or massive event that's going to have some plasma discharge which will disrupt our weather systems and cause mega droughts. And they were talking about lakes drying out in an instant during these older legends of Ho-E. So there was some huge plasma event. So regardless if it's a plasma event or an EMP, it's literally in 2019 based on the ancient legends. So if it's an EMP, it's going to be one of three scenarios. First, the solar wind drops below % and we get a single EMP. Whatever side of the planet's facing that, well, it's going to be a reset button. Scenario number 2, solar wind drops to 36%, first EMP as it goes below 36, and then it tries to recharge and jumps above 36, and then it sends another EMP, and then it drops below 36 and sends another one out again until it stabilizes, with 3 rounds of EMPs above and below the 36% level. Or, third case, which I don't think is going to happen, but I just am going to toss it out there. It would continually jump above and below the 36% again and again and again, and each successive step up or down would usher in an EMP. It'd be more like blast, 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 literally like a strobe light of EMPs above and below that 36% line. This would be more like a pulsar. I really don't think it's going to happen, but I wanted you to know that I was thinking this direction of what could happen. Please support my work on Patreon. My next video is going to be about the Big Dipper, 北斗七星, which the ancient Chinese said our consciousness originates from. They gave us a direct point in the heavens where the Birkeland current powering our star originates from. I want to go into that in further depth and how they've turned the Big Dipper into a religion, the Order of the Big Dipper, and how this transiting around the pole star has given us the icon of the cross. I'm going to be traveling around more temples, putting this information together. And I do appreciate you watching the video and measuring everything up with the ancient historical accounts and the numerology within the Chinese mysticism, 36%. I really wonder what's going to happen. You need to prepare yourself anyway. There's so many strange things going on planet-wide anyway. It would just be a good idea for you to have some emergency supplies around, just in case the terrestrial weirdness of wars break out, or a power grid does go down due to overusage in a cold event, or just your day-to-day lives, let alone all the sun-earth effects that are about to be unleashed upon us. But I wish you all the best of luck, and as long as the power stays up, I'm going to keep bringing you videos like this, along with my regular Adapt 2030 grand solar minimum effects on the planet of our weather, crop losses, etc. that we see. But I really want to start delving more into the ancient mythology, the mystery schools, the Taoist worship, and these different types of things that a lot of people are unfamiliar with in the West. I've been living out here for several years. This is what I'm studying, and I want to try to present you my findings to see how we can match with modern physics, to see if we can get a true timeline going out for the intensification of the grand solar minimum, because this will affect our societies as it has every time through history.